Hello, creative and crafty people. I hope y'all are doing well today. In this video, I'm going to show you how I created these fun Jasper and copper wire earrings. I'll be using Jasper beads, but keep in mind that you can choose any type of beads you'd like to make your piece unique. And you can also use any wire, such as silver, gold, or even platinum. There are many different types of wire out there. I use copper for its cost effectiveness and its ease of use, especially if I'm just practicing. Have fun and make it your creation. If you'd like to learn how I created these earrings, then stick around and let's get creating. Materials I'll be using for this project are as follows. We're going to need 2 pieces of 18 gauge wire cut at 9.9 centimeters, 2 pieces of 20 gauge wire cut at 4.3 centimeters, 2 pieces of 20 gauge wire cut at 2.4 centimeters, and 2 pieces of 20 gauge wire cut at 1.9 centimeters. You're also going to need 2 6mm Jasper beads and 2 4mm Jasper beads. You're going to need some looping pliers, a pair of chain nose pliers, a pair of flush cutters, a chasing hammer, a bench block, a ring mandrel, a file, and a marker to mark center on your wire. This concludes the materials you'll need for this project. If you missed something, you can either go back and rewatch this part of the tutorial, or you can check out the materials list in the description down below. Now let's get creating. To start this project, we're going to need to grab those 2 18 gauge wires that we cut at 9.9 centimeters in length. And we're going to put those 2 pieces of wire together like so. And we're going to grab the looping pliers and grab that wire right between the 2 and 3mm barrels of your looping pliers. Then we're going to wrap that 18 gauge wire around the 2mm barrel. We're going to wrap it all the way around until the ends of the wire touch back against itself. Like so. Now we're going to pull those off of the looping pliers. And here you can see that we've got 2 nice matching loops. And lining up our wires so that they're both even, grabbing our marker and our measuring device. We're going to measure from the end of these 2 wires about 5.4 centimeters from the end, like so. And then we're going to make a mark right at that 0 spot, since we're measuring this direction. There you can see I'm making that mark. Sorry, it's out of focus there. There we go. And that just marks our center point. And then grabbing the ring mandrel at the size 7 mark, you're going to take your 2 wires and place them on the mandrel with the mark you made on the wire at that size 7 spot. With my thumb, I'm going to press it up against the mandrel, making sure it stays in that spot nice and tight, and then bring the 2 tail ends of both of those wires to the back of this mandrel. You want your loops to come right directly halfway across this mandrel, up above there. We're making a teardrop shape here, so you don't want to press it down onto the mandrel. And then grabbing the 2 tail ends, not the loop side, but the tail end side, you're going to splay those wires apart and put them on each side of those loops. and I'll show you that here in just a second. So here you can see both of those wires are on each side of the loops here. And we're going to push those over on top of those loops, like so. And there we've got two pieces that are the same. Now when we invert one of these pieces, you could see that we've got a mirror image, and that's what we're wanting. So now we're going to take our piece, and with the tail end of the wire, without the loop, we're going to push that down slightly so that that wire lines up with the bottom side of the loop, like so. Now grabbing the teardrop shape really tightly, we're going to push the tail end of this wire down and around the wire with the loop on it, like so. We're going to push that down as tight as possible with our fingers, and then once we get it to that point, we're going to grab the chain nose pliers and just mash this wire down onto that base wire under the loop. We want to make sure that that stays up close to the loop, like so. And then taking our chain nose pliers to the inside of the teardrop shape, we're going to grab the tail end of that wire and just bend it out slightly, like so. And then we're going to finish pressing this wire down to tighten it down onto the neck of that teardrop, like so. And it's nice and tight, it's not going to move anywhere. We're just going to make sure it's really good and snug. And then I'm going to take this wire and I'm going to bend it in toward the center of my teardrop just slightly, like so. And the reason I need to do that is so I can grab a hold of it with my looping pliers here, because we're going to create a little loop on the inside of this teardrop. So using the 2mm barrel, I'm going to grab the tail end of that wire and create a small little loop, like so. And while you're doing this, you're going to need to readjust your pliers so that you can actually continue this loop all the way up without distorting your teardrop shape. So there you can see the completed loop, making sure it's centered up there in the top. And there is our first frame of our earring. And now I'm just going to do some quick little adjustments here, make sure everything is good and snug and tight, like so. And now with the magic of video editing, I'm going to do the second piece off camera, and there you go. We got two identical pieces that are mirrored to each other. Now we're going to grab our bench block and our chasing hammer, and we're going to texture this piece. So using the opposite side on my chasing hammer with the little ball side of the hammer, we're going to texture our piece. Not only will it harden it, but we're adding almost a glittery appearance. It creates little dents in the wire all over, but it reflects that light and gives it a cool look. So here you can see I've got my whole piece hammered, and then with my chain nose pliers, I'm just going to make sure we're all nice and flat and even everywhere after hammering, like so. Do any little adjustments we might need. And then I'm also going to put this back on the ring mandrel and just make sure that we haven't lost our shape. And there you could see the textured look on these earrings. Just gives it a unique look. And now we're going to grab our 20 gauge wire cut at 2.4 centimeters. We're going to grab both of those wires together and the looping pliers, and with our 2mm barrel, we're going to wrap that wire around that barrel until the tail end of those wires meet back up with itself. We're going to pull the looping pliers out of the loop, readjust our loop, and then reinsert that 2mm barrel. And then we're going to straighten the end of this wire down. So we're making our little head pins here for our beads. And then we're going to pop that 4mm Jasper bead onto that head pin like so. Because I wasn't happy with the placement of that bead, it was up too high from the top of the loop, I'm going to grab my chain nose pliers and just give a nice little crisp bend at the base of that loop, and then place my 4mm Jasper bead back onto the head pin, and now you can see that bead is just right up against that loop like I want it. And now I'm going to take the tail end of the wire and give it a nice 45 to about a 90-degree bend in that wire at the top of the bead. And then grabbing my looping pliers again, I'm going to create a loop with that 2mm barrel once again all the way around. And notice once I get all the way around, my loop does not make it all the way down to the bead. So I'm going to trim off just a hair at the end of this wire. I'm going to flush cut that, grab my 2mm barrel, and tighten that loop down once again. And notice how that's just a little bit snugger. It just gives it a little bit of a nicer appearance, and it keeps everything nice and tidy. And now off camera, once again, I've created a second one. And now we're going to create our next bead elements. So grabbing our 6mm Jasper beads and the two 20 gauge wires cut at 2.9 centimeters. The bench block and the chasing hammer. We're going to place both those wires together side by side on the edge of that bench block. And then we're just going to hammer the ends of these wires. I'm going to give them a couple of good whacks. Like so. And there you could see those wires are flattened and the ends are slightly splayed out. So now we're going to set that bench block to the side, and grabbing my chain nose pliers, I'm going to grab the very end right over the top of that flattened part of the wire, and then I'm going to bend the end of that wire at a 90-degree angle, like so. We're going to do that to both of these wires. So grabbing the very tail end, we're going to give this a 90-degree bend, like so. And now we're going to grab our file. And we're going to just file the ends of these little flattened areas. They get a little sharp and jagged, so we just want to make sure we get a nice little file so nothing will catch or pull on these. Making sure it's all nice and smooth. And there you can see it's kind of rounded off on the edge. We're going to do the same thing with the other one. And I like to use my thumbnail to kind of help me with the filing process there, which is probably not the best for my nails, obviously. So here we've got the ends nice and bent. Grabbing my 6mm bead, I'm going to pop that on there. And you can see there where that little flat piece is just up a bit, and I kind of want it to lay flat against the bead, so I'm going to give it a little bit more of a bend, a little bit past 90 degrees, like so. And then we're going to pop that bead back on there, like so, and see how that just lays up nicely against the back side of that bead. And then we're going to grab that 2mm barrel of the looping pliers, and we're going to create our loop again. And once again, This loop is a little long. This tail end is a little long for my loop, so I'm going to cut off a piece of that tail end of that wire. And with my looping pliers, grab a hold of that loop and we're going to wrap it around. And there you can see it comes right up against the bead. And again, with the magic of video editing, I have 2 done. So now we need to put these together. So grabbing my chain nose pliers, I'm going to open one of the loops of the smaller 4mm bead finding, like so. And by open, I mean twist to the side, never pull it out away from itself. It will misshape that loop. Place the 6mm bead onto the end of that loop. With my chain nose pliers, I'm going to twist the loop back closed and into place. And then we're going to take the loop on the other side of the 4mm bead and open it up, twisting it out to the side. And we're going to pop that onto the loop that's inside one of the teardrop shapes. And again, twist that loop closed, like so. And there we have the beads placed on our frame. And now we need to do the same thing with the other side. So grab that 4mm bead finding, open one of those loops by twisting it to the side, place the 6mm bead finding onto the loop, and then twist that loop closed. Flipping that 4mm bead over, we're going to open the other loop on the other side by twisting it out, making sure we got it open enough. And then we're going to pop that onto our little loop on the inside of the teardrop shape, like so. I'm going to flip our piece over and then twist that loop back into place. And there is the second one. Now we need to create our ear wires for these earrings. So grabbing our 20 gauge wire cut at 4.3 centimeters in length, grab both wires together, that 2mm looping plier barrel. We're going to wrap those wires around there, bringing the ends of those wires to meet up with itself, ensuring that those loops are closed. We're going to pull them off of the looping pliers. And then we're going to take those loops and put them between the 7 and 9mm barrels, ensuring the loops are facing the 7mm barrel. We're going to take the tail end of the wire and go around the 9mm barrel, like so. And now we're going to bend that wire all the way around until it meets up on the other side about 5mm away from the loop. And there we have our matching pair. We're going to grab our chain nose pliers and grab these wires right at the end. And we're going to just give them a little bend upward or away from the loops, about 2mm from the end. And there you can see the shape of our ear wires. Now we're going to grab our bench block once again. I'm going to move these out of the way. And we're going to hammer the outside edge of these ear wires. We don't want to hammer the part that goes into the ear, because we want that to stay nice and round. We don't want a square peg going into a round hole. And we're just hammering and flaring out that wire just a little bit, just to give it a little fancy look. We're going to do the same thing on the other side. And we're just hammering out away from that ear wire, like so. And I'm going to go just a little bit higher with this one. And there we go. You can see how that light catches on that flat surface. So now we're going to grab our chain nose pliers, and we're just going to open this loop by twisting that wire out to the side, not out away from the piece. And then I'm going to grab my earring and we're going to place it on facing forward. And then we're going to twist that loop back closed again, like so. And there is our first earring completed. And now we're going to do the same thing with the other earring. So grab that ear wire, grab the loop, and then twist that out to the side like so. Make sure you twist it enough so that you can get your earring on, ensuring it's facing forward like so. And then we're going to grab the chain nose pliers and close that loop back up. And there's the second earring. And there we have our completed earrings. I hope you all enjoyed watching this video. Let me know in the comments below what you thought. I'd really love to hear your feedback. Also, don't forget to give me a thumbs up. This just lets YouTube know that you enjoyed my content, and in turn, YouTube will push these videos out to even more creative people like yourself. If you haven't already and you'd like to see more of my tutorials, then click that subscribe button. It's free. And by subscribing to my channel, you can be notified when a new tutorial is up for you to view. Thank you guys for your continued support. I sure do appreciate each and every one of you. Thanks for watching, and I'll see y'all next Thursday.